Hi class. So I wanted to post a quick video update, or maybe we'll call it a mini lecture, that ties into both the essays that you guys wrote last week and the topic that we're studying this week. Reason being, most of the class chose rational choice theory as their explanation, as the best explanation of crime. Unfortunately, most of you are actually wrong. I equate rational choice theory to flat earth theory, and there's a number of reasons why. First of all, saying that you believe in rational choice theory because you believe in choice is a bit like saying you believe in flat earth theory because you believe in earth. Yeah, I believe that humans have choice too, just as I believe in the earth. Unfortunately, you've kind of missed the key part of the theory, which is rational and flat, neither of which are true. Human beings are not rational. They're not perfectly rational anyhow in the way that rational choice theory would presume and the way that our criminal justice system operates. So we know, for instance, that humans are highly emotional. We also know that there are a number of environmental and psychological and biological factors that influence on our decision-making processes, on our choice processes. That does not make decision-making perfectly rational, and therefore throws into question all of the basic assumptions of rational choice theory. So again, saying that you believe in rational choice theory because you believe in choice is like saying you believe in a flat earth because you believe in earth. You've kind of missed the most important part of the theory. That's fine for now, but it's something that I hope to correct. And the reason that we start with rational choice theory in the textbook even is because we kind of contrast it with other positivist theories of crime that actually really hold up to a lot more scientific evidence. Now, it makes sense. The reason a lot of you chose rational choice theory is because it makes common sense, right? Based on our own personal experiences, based on life, that's the thing that makes most sense to us. Okay, humans have choice. We basically evaluate the risks and the rewards, and we make decisions based on that. It certainly feels that way to most of us. Fortunately, it's not true. The fact is that these kind of common sense experiences have misled humans' understanding of the reality of all kinds of nature since the beginning of time. So, for instance, common sense tells us that the Earth is flat. Even though you and I have never been to space and never seen the curvature of the Earth, we know that the Earth is round, right? At least I hope so. If you're here at the State College of Florida, I certainly know that you wouldn't pass an astronomy class believing that the Earth is flat, and I certainly wouldn't let you pass a criminology class believing in rational choice theory either, believing that human beings are rational. All of the social sciences are based on the idea that humans are not perfectly rational. So our common sense has misled us. Where else is that true? Well, how about the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe? It certainly makes sense, right? We see the moon and the sun kind of circle around us, and our kind of egos lead us to believe that Earth is the center of the universe. Of course, you've never been into space. Once again, though, you probably never even run the mathematical formulas, but you know that Earth is not the center of the universe. It's not even the center of the solar system. What about disease? Well, you also know that our personal experience tells us that diseases may be kind of random, or that it's caused by evil spirits. Now, I've never seen a cold virus, but I know that disease is caused by either a pathogen like a virus or it's caused by some kind of an autoimmune disorder. It's not random. It's not caused by evil spirits or anything like that. So once again, I want to reemphasize that our common sense misleads us time and time again. And so we have to rely on scientific evidence, and that's true even in the social sciences. What does the scientific evidence say about rational choice theory? Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of support for it. Decades of scientific research have established that it just doesn't hold up to its basic assumptions. So we know that it's based on three ideas, right? It's based on the certainty of punishment, the swiftness of punishment, and the severity of punishment. We know at the very least that two of those don't hold up to the evidence and in fact may backfire, and that is the swiftness of punishment and especially the severity of punishment. We know that more severe punishments do not reduce the likelihood of an offender from reoffending again in the future. And we also know that very severe punishments don't reduce the overall rate, the overall crime rate in society. So three strikes laws and minimum mandatory sentences and things like that don't actually work to reduce crime. And that really speaks against rational choice theory. Now, there's something to be said about the certainty of punishment. It does appear that the likelihood of being caught really can have a deterrent effect. The effects are relatively small, kind of inconsistent, and it really draws into question a lot of things about, I mean, we basically need a police state to really increase the certainty of punishment, and obviously that kind of goes against our better judgment, right? So just to reemphasize, rational choice theory, it doesn't hold up logically, and it doesn't hold up empirically. It also brings into play a lot of questions about when you look at the patterns of crime that we've studied in previous chapters. It really brings up a lot of ethical questions. Okay, well, what does it mean to say that humans are all rational, perfectly rational, more or less, and equally rational, and that they simply weigh the costs and the benefits and make a calculated decision that justifies the punishment? Well, first of all, if we know that the vast majority of criminals are men, what does it say about men? We're either incredibly irrational, which undermines rational choice theory, or we are rational, but that brings up a lot of questions about, well, what is it about the costs and rewards of being a man that are different from the costs and rewards of being a woman? Well, maybe it has to do with the fact, for instance, that masculinity is so important, particularly in America, or that self-respect is all young urban men have in the inner cities, like Chicago, okay, where self-respect and pride and those kinds of things are far more important. And the loss of those things is far worse than the loss of freedom in prison. Well, that does bring up a lot of questions. Maybe then they are being rational, but that still brings up a lot of concerns about the environment, right? It brings up a lot of concerns about socialization and things like that. What about race? We know that African Americans offend more than white Americans. Well, if rational choice theory is the best explanation of crime, then that brings up a lot of kind of dangerous thinking about African Americans. They're either less rational, again, which undermines the theory anyhow, or they're more rational. But then we have to ask ourselves, why is it that an African American, that it would make more sense in an objective way to commit crime for them than it would for others? Well, then we know that there's things like poverty at play. And we're going to get into those kind of positivist explanations of crime in a bit, which perform far better in scientific studies than the rational choice theories that most of you supported. Now, once again, there's three components of rational choice theory, as I mentioned, and you're getting into the chapter right now. And they are the certainty, the swiftness, and the severity of punishment. So to illustrate that human beings are not perfectly rational and that rational choice theory doesn't even make sense logically, I have a scenario for you. I want you to play along. I actually want you to get a pen and paper and play along with me if you can. So assume that you've attended a party, you've consumed more alcohol than you intended to consume. You are certain that you were legally impaired. You need to decide whether you're going to drive home or not under the influence of alcohol. Now, assume that you've never been arrested before. First question is, if you drive, what do you believe are the odds you'd be detected by law enforcement? Now, I really do want you to write this down because I want you to commit to a decision. We'll revisit it in just a moment. What are the odds that you would be detected by law enforcement for driving under the influence of alcohol? 1%, 10%, 20%, or 50%, roughly? You write it down? You're going to write it down, right? All right, great. If you were arrested, how long do you believe it would take to resolve your case and face legal punishment? Would it be days, weeks, months, or years? Write it down. Finally, what do you think is the most likely punishment for a first offense for DUI? Which is basically a reckless, a dangerous behavior in which you could risk your own life or somebody else's. What is the most likely punishment? You can look up the statute if you want, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what the most likely punishment would actually be. But what do you think? What does your gut tell you? Would it be a day in jail, a week in jail, half a year of probation, or half a year in jail? So I've used this scenario in class many times. And now, sometimes it doesn't even matter what the true answers are. Part of the purpose of this is to illustrate how much people disagree. Now, for the very first question, for example, if you drive, what are the odds you'd be detected by law enforcement? What are the odds you would be caught for driving under the influence? Well, the true answer is about 1%. So for every 83 offenses that an alcoholic drives under the influence, they find that only one of those results in detection, apprehension, and arrest. 1%. Most students do not respond 1%. They respond at least a bit higher than that. And so that illustrates that rational choice theory has a problem because people are not even accurately calculating the odds of punishment. You cannot make a rational choice based on risks and rewards if you can't properly evaluate the risks. And most students do not. That's strike number one. Strike number two is that the certainty of punishment, which is a key component of rational choice theory, is so incredibly small, 1% for this particular crime. And it's not much higher than that. In fact, the assumption is that fewer than 1 in 5 criminals are ever caught for anything. When we throw all crimes together, even much more serious crimes than DUI. And so there are a number of reasons that rational choice theory doesn't even make logical sense, regardless of whether you want to believe any of the empirical evidence that I presented a moment ago, the decades of research that have been done on it that kind of speak against it. So, once again, I just want to reemphasize rational choice theory doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense logically. It doesn't make a lot of sense based on the objective evidence that social scientists have collected over the years. So it makes common sense, but common sense is wrong in the same way that it misleads us naturally to believe that the earth is flat. You came here to get an education. Hopefully by now you've been taught that the earth is round and it revolves around the sun. My job is to make sure you don't leave college without understanding that your concept, that your perception, that your assumption about human nature and rational choice is incorrect as well. So one last thing that I want to point out, one major glaring issue with the essays was the lack of scientific evidence. And this is probably why many of you were unled, because you did not use scientific studies that would have supported or refuted some of your assumptions about the best explanation for crime. Well, you'll note that on Canvas, I have included a resources module, and one of the items is called Conducting Research, a Very Brief Introduction. I want you to go in there, and I want you to review the 2 links that I've included. One is basically helps you determine what qualifies as a scholarly article. Many of you used about pages or wikis or things like that. Those do not qualify as scientific evidence. Those are not objective scientific inquiries into the nature of reality. Okay, I expect social science research to look like hard science research. And you need to be sure that you're using high quality academic resources in your essays. I won't take off this week, but for the next essay, you can bet that I will if you're not using reputable resources. If you don't know what those are, you need to go ahead and visit this link at the SCF library that will help you determine that. Secondly, how do you find them? It's true, especially if you're taking an online course and you're working from home, you may be stuck. A lot of these academic articles are stuck behind a paywall. Well, the SCF library, as most school libraries do, they pay licensing fees to get access to these, and these are available to you as a student. So I want you to use the SCF database in order to find academic articles that will help you evaluate the issues. You need to incorporate those into future essays. Now, in future weeks, we're going to go into a lot more detail about the causes of crime. And this is an area that really fascinates me, it really excites me, as you might be able to tell. And there are a number of causes and factors and influences on the etiology of criminal behavior. Some of those are biological, and we'll get into those next week. Some of those are psychological. We'll get into those next week as well. Many, many more are social and environmental. Okay, and so we find that there are so many influences on crime that go beyond a simple, rational, calculated calculation of risks and rewards, which humans do not do well. Now, it's important that I demonstrate this, right? So there's an extra credit opportunity that I'm going to use that may earn you points and will also illustrate whether or not human beings are rational, even college-educated human beings here at the State College of Florida, okay? So we're going to do an experiment, a truly objective experiment to determine whether or not humans are rational. So I'm going to offer an opportunity for up to 3% extra credit at the end of this course. But here's the catch. Here's the experiment. I'm going to randomly split the class into 2 halves. Half of the class is going to choose how to distribute 10 points of extra credit. So that's 10 points. It'll be worth about 3% of your final grade, but it's 10 points. And so half of you will get to decide how to distribute that. You could say, I'm going to keep all 10, and my partner, who's also going to be randomly chosen, gets 0. Or you can say, I'm going to choose 5 points, and I'm going to allow my randomly chosen partner to get 5 points as well. Or you can say, I'm going to take 9, I'll give him or her 1 point. So if you're chosen to distribute the points, you can distribute them in any way you like, between yourself and between the other randomly selected anonymous student. The other half of you will have to choose whether or not to accept or reject the offer. So there's no renegotiating. You can choose to accept the offer that's been made, and then the points will be distributed just as indicated, or you can choose to reject the offer, in which case neither of you earns any points. So I'll follow up with each of you in order to seek your input, whether that's distributing the points or whether that's choosing to accept or reject the offer. So I will follow up with each of you in just a bit. So I want you to pay special attention to this chapter. I want you to look out for my email for the extra credit opportunity, in which case we're doing an experiment to determine whether or not human beings are rational, whether we accurately assess the risks and the rewards, because that has important implications for whether criminals are accurately assessing the risks and the rewards. All right? So I'm going to close with one more thing. You guys, a lot of you justified rational choice theory because it finally made sense, or you finally understood why the criminal justice system in America operates the way it does, why it's designed the way it does, why the punishments are distributed the way that they are. And I want to reemphasize that not believing in rational choice theory, or more accurately, acknowledging that it is not the best explanation for criminal behavior, does not present a threat necessarily to the American criminal justice system. And that's because there are other justifications for punishing criminals. Okay? Now, personally, I would rather see us do things that we will get into in coming chapters, particularly when it comes to early childhood nutrition or reducing exposure to harmful contaminants like lead and mercury, or just early childhood nutrition and things like that are proven again and again to provide the greatest bang for the buck and huge returns on investment and huge reductions in crime. We don't do that. We focus on waiting until the damage is done and then trying to respond. Be that as it may, I want to point out that there are justifications for that, even if we don't believe in deterrence. One of those is retribution. The idea that somebody deserves to be punished for what they've done to another person. That's a fine justification. It is not, however, a scientific justification. It is not objective evidence. It is an ethical and moral decision that we collectively as a society are entitled to make. But it's not a scientific explanation, and therefore we will not focus on that in this class. The second justification that's not deterrence is incapacitation. It may make sense, and I believe this wholeheartedly, particularly for violent criminals. It makes sense for the people who are not rational. They're clearly not making rational choices, and as I've already said, none of us are truly 100% rational. It makes sense to remove those people from society and put them in a place where they can't harm others, simply to incapacitate them. So, even if rational choice theory is not correct, does not present a threat to our criminal justice system, this is not meant to attack our criminal justice system or the professionals who work there. But I don't want you leaving this course unless you understand that rational choice theory is a poor explanation for crime. Just as I wouldn't want you leaving an astronomy class believing that flat earth theory is a reasonable explanation for the nature of our solar system. If you have any questions, please reach out. Please email me. I'm very excited about theory. I love to talk about these kinds of things and anticipate a follow-up email from me regarding the experiment in this class that we're going to use to kind of illustrate how rational we are. Have a great week.